I don't think there's anyone else from seasons that I participated, but by the way, that was great experience, and that's why today I'm here and participating in this program. And I'll be talking about Afghanistan's part in the demographic dividend and development in South Asia. So when we look at the statistics, 40% population of Afghanistan is unemployed. This includes underemployment and unemployment both. So what that means is not only female, but males also have problem finding a good job in Afghanistan. But when we look at the percentage from this 60% who's employed, the population for female who are employed is 27%. The rest is for male. But 27% is a good percentage for a South Asian country. But the problem is that this percentage is really high in capital of Afghanistan in Kabul, but it's much lower in other provinces. That might go really low in southern and northern provinces, where females, their only job is not working in offices, but you'll find a lot of ladies who work in agriculture sector, like they do a hard work. I'm not saying that they shouldn't work there, but we should consider that agriculture is the hardest sector where women can be employed. Also, for the only problem is not that we don't have enough job in Afghanistan, because many jobs could be created. That's not a big problem. Investments happens all the time, and jobs are created much. But the problem is that people do not find their desired job because they are not literate. The population who are educated is 38%. That's for male and female. And from this percentage, really low population is female. The female literacy rate is really low in Afghanistan. Of course, that would create problem for people who are not literate, and if they want to be a part of the labor force, then obviously that would create problem, and that would lead these people to go and participate in physical jobs, or they might work in agriculture sector, which makes it harder for women. And about the age dependency ratio, unfortunately for Afghanistan, it's the highest. It's 81%. Just saying the percentage is, I think, enough to talk about this. Also, I can say that in Afghanistan, for now, looking at the literacy rate and these many problems like that Afghanistan is currently suffering from, insecurity, and this is like not a big, this is a big issue, not something that we can just ignore. I think the best sector for Afghanistan for now, for short term, would be agriculture, to be employed and working. Because if we look at the statistics, 73% population of Afghanistan lives in rural areas, and from this 73%, 85 to 90% of them are employed in agriculture sector. So for now, the best sector for, in short term, of course, for Afghanistan would be agriculture sector to working. Thank you.
Thank you, Rukia, for bringing also the sectoral perspective. I think each of you has been really putting the emphasis on one angle that is very important. I think, as you say, when so many people are still in rural areas or engaged in agriculture, that brings a particular angle. Last but not least, we have Sarita from Nepal.
Hello everyone. I'm Sarita Bertola from Nepal, And I was a SANEM participant in 2009 in Bangladesh and 2011 in India. This was really our decision to make this talk. So I will be highlighting more on youth perspective. Since my long experience of working on youth development in Nepal, I will be highlighting more on youth. And thank you, Salim sir, for this opportunity to talk on behalf of Nepal. So in case of Nepal, we have almost 29 million population, and in this population, the biggest chunk of population is a young population, youth, that is 40.8%. So while taking this biggest chunk of the population, this comes as a both opportunity and challenge for Nepal, and we can say it's a transition for Nepal to go in a demographic dividend. And as a challenge, what we can take is Nepal, as we have been talking around whole days, like Nepal is the biggest. Nepal is a country which has a very high proportion of migrant population, and almost 29% of the GDP of Nepal is dependent on remittance. Well, with increasing number of labor force in the market, how the government going to utilize this productive age group? Well, the young population is one of the very creative population, creative group of population. It is also considered that the people among the age group of 20 is one of the most creative group of the people. And at the same time, this is a very vulnerable group of people. So the country with who is supplying labor to the world, how it's gonna balance this vulnerable and the creative age group? At this, if the government could not balance this age group, then there might be the disaster in this demographic dividend. To address those issues, there has been different policies government has tried to implement in Nepal. Like government of Nepal has a youth ministry, recently the youngest ministry as a youth ministry, and they also have a youth vision for the young people of Nepal. We have the youth employment fund as well, and there are different ministries which are taking youth as cross-cutting issues. At the same time, so how government of Nepal going to address the frustration people are having, the unskilled labor that are migrating to the Middle East, and at the same time the distant labor market in Nepal. Well, I talked before as well. We consume a biggest number of labor in the construction sector, and the biggest proportion of this labor come from India, and sometimes from Bangladesh as well. And we are sending the same group of people, the construction labor, to the Middle East. So why Nepal is not being able to consume this labor force in Nepal, or what is the biggest issues behind this? Then that's a distant labor market. So it is another challenges for government of Nepal to utilize this productive age group. At the same time, the brain drain, we have been sending lots of people to Australia, students to Australia, and Nepal also stands for the third country sending the student in America. So what after that? We send the unskilled labor. At the same time, we are sending the skilled educated group to the abroad. So what happens if they want to come back to Nepal? There are lots of people who from the Middle West who want to come back to Nepal. They earn the money with all the labor force. They want to invest in Nepal, but there is no investment secure environment for them. The social security things is not working. So that is another biggest challenge the government is facing. At the same time, talking lots, this might be quite pessimistic view, but we can still set towards the optimistic view. What are the opportunities that we may have when we are having the biggest bloods of the people, young people, biggest number of workforce in Nepal, and this is opening window. This opened the opportunity of window for the growth in Nepal as well. So at this time, if the government need to create more opportunity for the employment, for the investment, not the FDI, but also the investment that the people working abroad can come back and create a more job in the country itself. And the young leadership. Well, we have a long transition, political transition phase with a huge political instability. So how Nepal gonna address this political instability to utilize the young population in the leadership? And the secure investment environment, of course, the safe migration. We are receiving lots of dead body in Nepal, like every day. Well, while the 1,000 people leave Nepal in a day, at the same time we receive a dead body as well. So, what is safe migration we are going to have? And it's not the 1,000 people that leave Nepal is only the formal data we have, and there are lots of informal data. The people going from India to Gulf country, the migrants working in India and Bangladesh as well, that's all happening informally. So how government gonna address this challenge as well? At the same time, if governments in Nepal and as a South Asia whole, if they could inform, empower, and involve the young people in every part, like from education to the policy making level, then these people gonna open a good opportunity of window for the South Asia as whole and country, and a specific country in South Asia. These people, the new mind, the people who have receptive view towards each other. They can change the history of the South Asia that is been a Cold War or kind of thing, or crisis that is happening in the South Asia. And like I can say, like SANEM have been one of the good example for this. And like the Youth SARC dialogue or different youth conference that's happening has been opening the political economic window for the South Asia as a whole. So the young population in the South Asia and Nepal has been bringing both opportunity and challenge. If government and the bilateral organizations, civil society organization could properly tap this population, then it's gonna boom the economy of the region as a whole. But if we could not focus this population in the early age, then this might cause the biggest disaster in South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarita. And of course, from Nepali perspective, migration had to be very central to the demographic dividend. So we have had excellent, very provocative interventions from the different countries. We have a bit of time for a discussion, and I think we should try to remain focused on the demographic dividend, but we can bring things that were discussed along the day, provided that there is a good connection with the wrap-up topic of this session. So let me open up and invite questions and comments. Yeah, please.
Excellent presentation. I really feel proud of you. Thank you. I just have three, I would say questions or comments, but probably I will expect the panelists, they can actually shed light on that. First is when you talk about the demographic dividend, actually in South Asia, when actually in general, there is a kind of window of opportunity. So demographic dividend is not going to last long. It's not going to last forever. So, and several studies are showing that actually for many of the South Asian countries, actually, they have in the phase where the demographic dividend is not going to last long. It's probably, if I cite the case of Bangladesh, probably by 2030 it's going to be over. For Sri Lanka, maybe Ravi can confirm that actually probably Sri Lanka has already exhausted a large part of the demographic dividend. So anyway, so how do you really then foresee that whether the business as usual scenario, the way the countries or the economies are moving, the way you have already identified so many challenges in South Asian countries. So how do you see that, whether are we in a good position, are we on the track to you exploit the window of opportunity, or it's will be a kind of missed opportunity, and we are not going to get it back anytime? So that's my first question. Second question, I think it is about to Ipshita. You rightly pointed out female labor force participation. I think this is something probably at the heart of the demographic dividend. Especially when you talk about youth employment, and large part of youth is female, and then they are not really properly employed. But there is a kind of hidden, I would say, paradox there with the female LFP, especially when I look at the data in Bangladesh, and also I can also assume in some countries, also in other countries in South Asia, though Nepal shows a very high level of LFP, but I would say there is a kind of definitional issue there. The differences in the way some of the activities which are incorporated in Nepal's LFP, female LFP, that is one of the reasons why there's a very high difference. But my question is that in this LFP, a significant part of this is actually unpaid family labor. So even in India, in Bangladesh, for Bangladesh I can say with full confidence that. So when you say even that 33% of female LFP in Bangladesh, a significant part of it is unpaid family labor, and which is by by definition is considered as the labor market participation. But it's no way it's a kind of decent job, or no, it's even a paid job. So then this is the big. So should we look at only the labor force participation, or what kind of is a wage employment, self-employment? What kind of employment categories we should look at? Thank you.
So who wants to respond? Big questions. Is it over already or close to being over? Have we missed it? Issues like how relevant is unpaid work for the empowerment, your second E. Anyone who wants to respond? Yeah.
I'll respond to Selincher's first question, and then Ikshita, you can. So first one, I think Karan already talked about it. What I understand is that the opportunity is still there for demographic dividends to capture that, but I don't see a particular plan from the government, or for example, what are the labor demand, from which sectors we are getting it. We need to know that. Let me stick to my point of view from migration. So if I want to send a skill, as Martin was saying, do we want skilled migrant worker to be sent in other countries, or we still want to stick with unskilled labor that we send to the Middle Eastern countries? I think the time has come that we should invest on human capital development, or some technical knowledges for these potential migrant workers, which could in returns bring more healthier remittances, and of course the quality of the job is going to improve, because we have been, I think, stick to a low equilibrium trap for a long time, given the unskilled labor that we have. So I think the opportunity is still there, but we need some policies to support that.
Thank you for bringing up a very important aspect. Yeah, labor force participation definitely is just the first step in understanding the gaps. I think methodologically there's been some interesting information coming out of time use data, and that actually could be very helpful, because like you mentioned, when we think of just LFP, it could include activities that are unpaid labor, and we may not be capturing exactly how far the gap is. So yeah, it would just be the first step. And I think we also need a lot more data on wages, because ultimately it's not so much about participating in the labor market for its own sake, but the economic empowerment that comes from it. So wage information would be critical to it. And yeah, I think time use data is the latest in this genre of trying to figure out what's going on with women's work in developing countries. And I do think there's some potential over there as well, especially to kind of parse out the different kinds of productive, unproductive activities, and including household labor, and not talking about
measured unpaid family labor, but also missed out unpaid domestic work, child, all these kind of things. So I think that might be the next direction where this where the empirical work is going. Let's see.
Anyone else?
I'd also like to make a comment. The first question, at least in context of India, I do think that we still have time, and with the present government and Prime Minister Modi leading the board, he carrying on certain policies like Make in India and just creating that environment to tap that potential. I am quite optimistic about it, and I'm quite sure that we'll utilize this window of opportunity. Coming to the second question, I'd just like to add on Ipshita's point that this unpaid family labor, which is often associated with women. I mean, it is high time that I mean, it is not coming from I'm not a feminist or so anything, but I can definitely say that it is high time that we should move on from housewives to house husbands, and men should also share equal responsibility in sharing the household work. Thank you.
I agree with Salim sir. Like I have always a question in Nepal unemployment data. It always comes to 3.2 or around 2.8. And we think like what? Whole Nepal and even the world is talking about Nepal unemployment rate and the poverty. How come the data comes to 3.2? So it's all about like the unpaid labor, the labor force that has been involved in agriculture are calculated as a paid labor, as an employed one. But we miss the fact that the agriculture sector, the people involved in agriculture sector produce only the amount that's enough for their consumption rather than to make the profit. And it's the same for the women as well. And in case of Nepal, we are having a good change in the women issues, like we have a parental leave during the pregnancy time, and we are now, our discussion is to the equal wage issues, so and the equal rights on the job market. So we are having a good change, and even the education, the girls going to school has been increased. The fertility rate has been decreased. So it has a good change, but still the biggest question, as you said, is having the employment is enough, or to have the access to finance is we need is to have the access to finance for the empowerment rather than just to be the part get involved in the family business or the agriculture.
So if we look at Afghanistan, like I refer to Mr. Salim's first question, government, many NGOs, even private sector has many programs for female. Even labor force and those who are not, to make them part of the labor force of Afghanistan. There are many trainings all around Afghanistan, I'm sure there's potential for not only female and male both, the labor force participation in Afghanistan, because if we look at the result of these trainings, there's a positive trend in the employment rate in Afghanistan after these trainings and these programs for the labor force. Previously, the unemployment rate was higher, but now, even though it's 40%, but much lower than years ago. And the result of these trainings was positive because if you look at the numbers, the fertility rate in 2010 and before that was really high. It was 7, 8. Now it is 5, which obviously we can see. Look at the differences of these trainings and the programs that are happening in Afghanistan to improve the quality of labor force and to include more people into labor force.
Thank you, Rukia. So now I see many more hands. So let me start from that side.
So my question is for Dr. Paul. In thinking about the legal and regulatory barriers to women's empowerment, I'm wondering if you could highlight any policy reforms that you've found to be particularly effective in increasing women's economic participation. So I know in India, certain states have lifted restrictions on the daily hours women can work in factories, and in Sri Lanka, commercial banks have been directed to allocate 5% of their total loan portfolios to women borrowers, but I would welcome your thoughts on other positive policy measures that countries in the region have enacted or could address in tandem.
So my research base is not in South Asia, so my direct understanding of a lot of these policy is very limited. But so basically, you know a lot more than I do about it. But I'll tell you conceptually what it is that we need. First of all, you need employment protection policies, strong employment protection policies to ensure that discrimination at the stage of hiring does not happen. And I was mentioning about kind of what family strengthening policies, such as family leave, such as maternity leave, which is now become a very popular thing. That's one of the most important kinds of policies that you would need to ensure a strong labor market attachment of women. And associated with it, of course, you will need child care policies, publicly funded child care, or at least some type of mandated child care, which actually Indian government now is trying to ensure through this new leave policy. I believe if you're an employer with 10 or more employees, you have to have a system of creche, and that, I mean, somebody correct me if I'm incorrect, but from what I remember, the idea is to have a sort of maternity leave, and also for the next few years of your child's life to ensure that employers have some kind of daycare arrangement. So these types of policies are essential to ensure that women don't leave the labor market for long durations, because research shows that post-motherhood wages decline. And this connection of wage decline with parenthood is limited to women. For men, fatherhood is usually associated with an increase in wages, and over time that sort of leads to more the kinds of gaps that you wouldn't want. So I think from the positive side, at least from my idea of what's going on currently in India, it's I think we've taken a few good steps, and because these changes are so new, we are yet to have the kind of empirical evidence we need. But I feel that some good studies are going to come out of this, because you have a good policy change, you can do your different type of thing, and I hope that over time we'll have the kind of empirical evidence we need. And that really pushes afterwards for policy change, the empirical evidence to show that yes, this is the kind of work family policy which you would consider a soft policy in many circles, which is giving rise to maybe stronger employment, stronger wages, and especially increasing women's participation. So hopefully these changes will result in some hard evidence on women's participation, how it's connected to policy. Sorry, it took more time than was needed about that.
Thank you, Ipsita. So let's go, Robert, you had one.
So of course it's in the interest of the countries to make best use of the demographic dividend, but it may be particularly so for the young. And I would like to hear a bit more who in your countries is raising the voice for the young, who's representing the young in the public debate, and what do you think is the most powerful way for the young to make its voice heard? Is it joining the political process, joining a party? Is it blogging? Is it enough to raise demands on social media? How does the young raise the voice?
Who wants to start on that one?
Well, I can give a little bit of a idea. So I can't answer directly the question. It's a very big question. I don't know what are the best routes. But from my experience with the youth mobilization, I dabbled with it a little bit after college. I think that there is enormous amount of passion in India, and people are also, the young people are also interested to participate and to educate themselves about what's going on. So I think that advocacy both in terms of information sharing and in terms of connecting communities to the political leaders. The youth could be the segue. You know, earlier I was giving the example of how community organizations have a certain knowledge that maybe a policymaker does not have. Youth in any country, in India especially, could be the segue between those community organizations and the political process. So I don't know the right answers, but I think you're right that there are several avenues through which the youth can become part of the advocacy for their own benefit. And so that's, that actually brings me back to the question of what Sanem was pointing out, whether we've missed the opportunity. I think the consensus is building that we have not missed the opportunity, and with the right kind of policies and advocacy, there might still be a lot that can be done.
Rukia, Sarita, your perspectives?
Yeah. So in case of Nepal, youth civil society is one of the biggest group of people that has been advocating for the youth rights. It has been like long years, 10, 15, 20 years of history of young youth civil society getting engaged over there. We have a youth association, we have a numbers of youth organization, we have a youth network from ground level to national level. And now, after long advocacy, we have a youth ministry and youth council. So even now people are preparing for the youth parliament, and even now in every committee that becomes from local level to national level, people have considered having the young people in the group. So we have a very strong civil society, and in a political party as well, we have sister organization that is for the young people to practice the politics and to get involved in the politics.
So in Afghanistan, we do many things. Like there might be protests just to raise their voice, and they want to government do something for us. On social media, university students, all of them do like different activities. But what I found mostly useful and which also had positive effect was college students. Government always listen to them, to their recommendations, where they want changes. So that's the best way for youth in Afghanistan to raise their voice. There was a new parliament in Afghanistan. It was youth parliament. It was made just like a year ago. So it's new. Still we are working on that. So that's also like a good way for you to raise their voice. Yeah.
Just to add on, I mean, my perspective a bit different than what my distinguished colleagues are saying. So what I think is that two things are happening right now in Bangladesh and many other countries in South Asia as well. So the barriers of entering like a political in politics for a young person is very high, first of all. And to make any social movement or let's say a revolution, I mean, there is of course participation of youth. For example, I'll give you an example. There is, you know, that India, Bangladesh, they're thinking to build this coal power project in Rampal and Sundarban. And the young people, from their perspective, they're thinking that it might have a disastrous environmental impact. So they're protesting against it. So they're coming in the road and protesting it. However, what is the fundamental change in this generation compared to the last young youth generation, let's say a couple of decades back? Now we want to concentrate in a particular, let's say, subject. If I'm studying economics, I want to do something good in economics. If someone is studying electrical engineering, he or she wants to go to the top level in that particular field. So I see that this is happening in this generation. Whatever they're trying to do, they're trying to develop their self to contribute in that sector rather than going to politics and make a real social change. That's my perspective.
You want to answer?
Yeah. I'd also like to add two things. One is the role of student unions in universities. This sharing of power, especially in higher education universities in India, is very important because many of the times, the student unions have immense power in, setting the direction of what they want and what the students want because they're a representative of the students, student body. So, and many of the student unions at the university level are associated with political parties at the national level. They have these national youth parties, be it NSUI or ABVP or any other parties, which are affiliated to the national party that, a higher level. So this sense of, political awareness and, raising their voice at, especially in universities is one method of, where the youth themselves, play an important role in fighting for their rights and, advocating for, a change and utilizing this, this potential energy which is there. Apart from that, there are also these, there is this huge wave in India, at least, I don't know about other countries, of MUNs taking place, Model United Nations, where, students go as delegates or as mock delegates of different nations and address various international issues. So these small things, like student unions and MUNs, they play an important role, where the youth take hands, address issues and taking, things in their own hand and trying to work towards it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If I may say, the impression I get from in South Asia, to try to give an element of answer to your question already, is that there is enormous engagement by youth. I think it's very clear. It's not a passive segment of society. At the same time, I think quite consistently it's not an engagement that goes through traditional participation in political parties. I see it very much happening in demonstrations, as Ruki has said, or I think what happened after the Delhi gang rape in December 2012. A lot in social media. For us at the World Bank, it's amazing the social media engagement we have in South Asia. I don't think we have anything equivalent in any of the other regions. I think just our country director for Pakistan has more tweet followers than our president at the World Bank at a global level. So it is this kind of caliber of things. So I see a lot of participation, but clearly voice is happening through other means, and I think this panel is an illustration of voice in some way. We were going in this direction. Yes, Ravi.
Just a couple of quick points. One, Moktu, on your issue, when you were looking at the household surveys, so I guess you were looking at returnees and looking at their stories. So maybe one additional aspect you could look at is the sort of permanent migrants, and so look at maybe UK data or the US data where you can find the Bangladeshi origin of a person who's in American data. And the other point I want to make was about gender, and I think one thing that's very important is, when the word like culture comes up, that we don't stop at the like outside our realm of activity, because behavioral economics and stuff really, which the bank also has acknowledged is important, that can actually play a role, right? And so I mean, even recently, I think like the acceptance of gay marriage in the US, right? So for example, there's like the importance of champions. Obama saying he changed his mind because he was having dinner with his daughter's friends' parents who were gay. They were the same as him, and we realized, okay, it's the same thing. So I think we also need champions who are willing to stand up for, either being, someone who's well respected, who decides to take time off to be with the newborn child, the man who does that, or who supports women, or, something like that. So I think don't stop that culture. Culture is always evolving, so we can make it happen.
I think that was more a comment than a question. Yes. Oh, Sarah?
Yeah.
We're going to this direction.
Yeah, just a really quick question. I want to bring the discussion back to the female labor participation. And then, as you may know, in South Asia, at least in India, Sri Lanka, a lot of women or stay-home mom, when they have a side business, spa shops or running handicrafts. And then recently we did this focus group discussion along with my colleagues on educating in India, Sri Lanka. When we talk to these women, ask them, are you expecting or do you want to expand your business if there's a demand? And very often the answer we got is that we cannot leave the kids at home. We have the social responsibility to be mother. So a lot of these days discussions about the increase in demand for female labor. But I think the supply constraint is also something to play. So when we're facing this kind of social constraints, how would you suggest to tackle that, or should we even encourage them, or at all to break that, let someone take care of the kids and then go out to work? I just want to hear your views since you're from the region as well.
I think it's a great question and also an important constraint that you're pointing out. It depends on the community. If it's a let's say it's a village community where maybe the reach of public child care facilities and those kind of things are quite a distant future, you could potentially have women do their own child care facility, where people take turns, so that not every individual mother has to be engaged with taking care of the children at home at the same time. You see what I mean? These kinds of little interventions have worked, and that could be one of the ways to go about it. The other thing is also looking at the conversation. Is it that the mother is the only one responsible for the children? I mean, where's the father? And there's a lot of, it's also mostly not nuclear families still in India, so tapping into the resources of other family members, the mothers-in-law, all these kinds of, I think there are resources over there, so the onus probably is to shift the conversation to, it's not just the mother's responsibility to give up on progress, the next stage of her business, etc., in order to attend to the children. When it takes a village, and it's true. There's I think the resources are available. If it can be, if we can change the social conversation about who is responsible at any given time. So that's just one idea.
Anyone else who wants to comment on changing culture?
I can share some cases study that we have in Nepal. We have a women group in Nepal. If anybody knows about that, it's something like microfinance. It's everywhere in Nepal, like from very rural part to the urban area. The few group of women from a community gather every week or month, and they save like a minimum price rupees, 5 rupees a week or 10 rupees a week, and they can give a loan or they take a loan from the same group. Some of the microfinance are they are formal and some are informal. And the women in rural part usually they buy some clothes or the hay, or they just or they do some small business. But the major problem is they don't have right to make decision. When it comes to expanding the business, when it comes to selling something for the more profit, when it comes to buying something, they need to ask with their husband or with their father or who they are dependent with. And another thing is like there are women who really want to go to the beauty parlor business or the tailoring business, but the thing they lack is to take a loan. There is a lot of banks who provide loan, but how are you going to get loan? You don't have any property, or you don't have anything that the bank could trust you, and the male partners at home is not ready to support you. So it's more about access to finance, and decision-making capacity is also one of the biggest issues in South Asia, especially that's the case from Nepal.
So how this works in Afghanistan is most of the time when the mother works outside, grandmother takes care of the children. Yeah, like this is a lot of time that happens in Afghanistan. Or most of the time, female who want to work, they don't have children, but when they do have children, they just leave their work. Yeah.
They're not willing to go back
Yeah.
to the labor force.
Yeah. So, but they are going back to work like after a few years, not months, years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're running out of time, so I think we have still more. Yeah, please.
All right. Thank you very much. It's really great to listen your voices from the panel. We've done a panel like this. And my question is also related with Robert. I mean, while I was listening your responses to the question you raised, that how to listen or how to incorporate youth voices into the policy domain. Then one of my observations is that you see in the South Asia region, about 70% of the population living in the rural areas. But the suggestions you gave, the measures you like mentioned, like college unions, students unions, and the social media and others, basically they are urban bias and more like a elite bias options for the youth. But while you have a population, 7% of the youth population living in the rural areas, and most of them are out of access to these different kind of measures, then how to listen their voice and how to get their ideas into the mainstream like policy domains to make best use of this democratic dividend? It's like a general question to the whole panel.
And let me add, just to be on the same line, I think when we think about social policies and responses, we tend to think about a lot of policies that are for people who are engaged in an employer-employee relationship. We think that in South Asia, about 10% of those at work are in formal employment, and perhaps a third to half of those are public sector. These are measures that may sound attractive as mandate that the employer provides this and that, but they may not do the bulk of the effort, as Rukia said when referring to sectors. Perhaps a lot is happening in agriculture. When you look at India and the decline of labor force participation among women, it has mainly happened in that area that is in between rural and urban, where basically farming jobs are disappearing, but the only other alternatives are construction. There are no office jobs, there are no safe factory jobs. And so I think we should try to, is a natural bias, but we should try to think broadly about the population at large. So this is just to complement the question and then throw the ball back to the group.
Recently, the Youth Ministry of Nepal has formed a youth commission, and we have Youth Ministry formed a national youth commission first, and then it goes all the way down to the district youth commission. So this is for the formal channel. The government is trying to get every individuals in the network. And in the youth commission, there need to have 50% of male and 50% of female. And even they have, we have a policy of inclusive policy based upon how to include the marginalized group as well. And in Nepal, we have a War Solution Forum. It is a very local level structure of the government. And from there as well, government have policies that we need to have 33% participation of women, and there is a proportion given to include the marginalized group, including young people as well. So this government initiative are in one side, and there are the civil society initiative making a youth network, women network, and even the political party making their political network from the ground level, district level, to the national level. This might be one. They are trying their best, and it's still doing a good progress to include all the voice from ground level to the national level.
Anyone else who wants to comment this?
Yeah. There is a platform about Afghanistan, because when people in rural areas, when they want their voice to be heard, what they do is they go to mosque. So they have like speakers and everything, like the whole area can hear them. And they tell the leader of they also have the leader of the village there. So they are talking about all these issues in the mosque, and then the leader transfers their message to top level. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we're getting to the, two questions.
I'll just have an observation on a very important question that Rishit raised. Then also on Salim's question, labor force participation. Ikshita, you said that if you increase the support for maternity leave, that makes a difference for labor force participation. Now, again, I know the others who have looked into this know, but I'm addressing this mainly for those who are going to do further research, so maybe the students, that it's a tricky issue. It's a tricky issue. Why? As I said, I like to think about the research that should go into, and it should be what they call controlled experiment. Does it really do it? And you know about the writing now. I've seen that as India's new maternity policy approach, number one. Number two, there's an alternative. And what is that? Daycare. I've seen studies, and I just digged up one very important study in China. And I knew from my own informal observation from movies that daycare is very good. What's the support system? Because Chinese people worked very hard to increase their labor participation ratio. There was a cost to it. So the question is which one works better? So that's the question. And the final thing is, really, does it really matter in a segmented labor market? Informal versus formal, and where there is unpaid work that's done. That brings me to Salim's question. Do we want to count unpaid labor? Again, this is in a Western country, in USA. You know, there's a big debate going on now with Donald Trump's policies. And what increases labor force participation ratio? It went down. It's gone through some things because people opt out of the labor market for various reasons. And so the question is, do we want to count unpaid labor in the income and everything? It's a traditional question which I learned in first year, Dhaka University, which is, if somebody works as a maid for the zamindar, her labor is counted. If she marries the zamindar and then does the same work, it's not counted. So that's this issue, and it's across the board. It's nothing new. I just placed it because I thought it's something that goes back to an age-old debate. What do you do national GNP or national income statistics? I'm not expecting any answer, just my observation.
And before you respond, let's try to finish at 5:30, so you have the last word.
Okay. Hi, I'm Saswati. I'm a graduate student, so I'm a young researcher, and it was wonderful listening to each of your individual perspectives on this, from the sectors and the youth, and the way migration works. And I particularly wanted to hone in on India, because I work with India. And thank you for bringing in caste as like a really important divisive inequality factor. And my question to you guys is, so while you're going through your work and your research, what are the things that you think to help with, getting the demographic dividend? What are the things you think are like gaps in research work, and things that you find might be inequalities that need to be sort of poked at and like studied more to really figure out what, where do you start looking? So you've got all these viewpoints. You've got women's empowerment, you've got caste, you've got the youth, you've got migration. Where, in your opinion, do you think, or should somebody start looking at, and where should like policies really hone in your opinion? Where do you think?
So it's great that you had the last question, because I think that sets the stage very, very well for your last word, your parting word. So I will start from Sarita, but basically you have two things to do each in about a minute. One is any general comment you may have, and second, your question, in a way, your answer to the question to the South Asian economic students meet, which is what should be the research priority areas for students in South Asia to address?
So basically my disagreement when it comes to development work in the case of Nepal is so the government and the NGOs, INGOs that are participating in development, they first build on the program issues, like what they want to do, and they go for the research. So it is more like when we study research, what we study is the researcher should not have anything on mind. This should be their mind should be empty so that they could find what exactly it is. But in case of Nepal, maybe it is the same thing in South Asia as a whole. We already have something in mind, what we want to do, and then we go to research and try. And most of the time, the data that came back then is more like manipulative one. It automatically gets manipulated. And so this is one of the biggest challenges I think in South Asia, in Nepal as in case of research. So I just want the government and the other implementing agencies, NGOs, INGOs, bilateral agencies, first to make a research and then to develop a program in the country. That's how it becomes a one-best development or need-based development you explained before, that the research found the mosquito net as a need for the poor people. But what people really want was not a mosquito net. They want was something for fishing. So we just want research that could find what the people need, the fishing things or the mosquito net.
Thank you.
So the research priority area for Afghanistan, I think, would be to see where we have opportunities, because we have lots of problems. We can't just solve each of them without considering the other one. But if you look at the opportunities that we can use, then I mean that would be the great point for starting the research.
Yeah, the one area which I think definitely the policymakers should focus on is accessibility to education, especially in the context of India, where as you said, the caste system has historically been spilled over certain effects which are still prevalent today. So in terms of cost as well as quality, access to quality education to all. That's higher education, especially. That's very important. Thank you.
I have a quick response to your earlier comment about the maternity leave and childcare. That's a long debate, and that's is generally understood that maternity leave may not be as conducive to labor force participation as childcare, and that's somewhat incorrect, because the idea for maternity leave is that you have to have it. It's a biological imperative. You have to have maternity leave, and what it does then is that it stops women from exiting from the labor market at the time of childbirth, and hopefully it keeps them more attached to the labor market. So I think both those things are very relevant. And to your question, there's just, I don't know where to begin. There's a lot of good research questions out there that can be explored. And from my interest, I would say, exploring gender dynamics and how that is impacting outcomes for women and larger macro outcomes for the country. That would be a good place to begin. If you're thinking about it as a different topic right now, those would be, I mean, if you have access to small communities, that would be something very interesting to really explore.
All right, I'll speak to like migration, and I can give you like 4 specific research topics right now. So I mean, why these are important, because